In my recent video to D.F. Polis on God and the laws of nature, in the comment section, a YouTuber by the name of thornisdan asked me about God's attributes and why I feel that God must have certain attributes. And he even made a video questioning this further. For example, why do I label God as being intelligent? Must God be all good? And so forth. And the response I gave to him, of course, was I don't really define God. I use the definitions of God as given to me by believers in God. They're the ones who say that this God critter exists, and this is what he is like. And they get that from biblical sources. They get it from logic and reasoning, like through Thomas Aquinas and so forth. So to the question of, must God have these attributes? And to that I can only answer, well, if the God that you're talking about doesn't have these attributes, but the God that I'm talking about does, then we aren't talking about the same thing. So if you're telling me that this critter called God exists, and what am I supposed to think about that? God exists? Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that a thing with these certain attributes is real. But what attributes? Well, thornisdan uses the word supreme being. Okay. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a supreme being? And the reason I bring this up is because in my response to Dr. Polis, he is trying to use the thing that is the source of the constancy of natural laws as God. And my criticism of that was, suppose you had something that does have the property of being able to keep the laws of nature constant. Does that itself necessitate that it is God? And I argued that no, because in most all monotheistic conceptions of God, he is an intelligent being. And if this were some unintelligent thing holding the laws of nature constant, then even though it does that, even though it fulfills one role of God, it wouldn't be God. Would you consider a God God if he weren't an intelligent being? Now, why intelligence? First of all, because the actions of God in, say, the Bible or the Quran show him as an intelligent being. And you might say, well, maybe that's just metaphor. Maybe that's just how human beings treat him as if he were an intelligent being. But then there's also the ideas from ontological arguments. God is supposed to be a maximally great being. He is supposed to possess all of the properties of greatness. And to be intelligent is, of course, greater than not being intelligent. So, by definition, then, God would be intelligent. And thornisdan brings up the question, well, why would we think that God's intelligence would be like human intelligence? And again, what does intelligence mean if it's not like human intelligence? Now, certainly there are things about human intelligence which God would not have. For example, human intelligence is limited, whereas God's intelligence would be unlimited. We don't have access to all knowledge and all facts, whereas God would. So certainly God's intelligence would be different than human intelligence, but only different in certain areas. It would be similar in certain areas. For example, God has a will, he has a volition, he wants certain things done, and he does them. Will is only associated with an intelligent thing. Do non-intelligent things have will? I mean, you could say, well, sure they do. Well, how would you know? Do rocks have will? Maybe they really just want to sit there and they don't want to do anything. But I don't know. Questions like that seem kind of ridiculous. The way God is treated, the way God is accepted, is that He is an intelligent being. To then back away from that and go, oh, well, maybe He doesn't need to be intelligent, or maybe He doesn't need to be intelligent in the way that humans are, really seems kind of disingenuous to me. I don't know. And that was an important point that I wanted to make to Dr. Polis, that it wasn't enough just to say, okay, here's this role which is traditionally filled by God, being fulfilled by something, which Dr. Polis showed through a deductive argument. And my point was to then jump to that and say, and therefore God is not enough unless you can show that that thing which holds that role also has some other traits, enough traits to define it as God. And the example I used in the comments of that video, that when thornisdan was asking me about this, was a triangle. Now, a triangle is a figure with straight sides, and that is absolutely true. That is a property of a triangle. But to say, okay, here I have a figure with straight sides, therefore it's a triangle, it's not enough, because that doesn't contain enough of the essential properties of a triangle in order to declare it a triangle. A square is also a figure with straight sides, but it doesn't qualify as a triangle because it has 4 straight sides rather than just 3. Similarly, yes, God is considered the creator of the universe and the one running the show, but just to say that the universe is here and created by something, and that there is something running the show, is not enough to say it's God. What if that's an unintelligent metaphysical process which created the universe and which holds the laws constant and is therefore running a show? Does an unintelligent metaphysical process qualify as God? Can an unintelligent metaphysical process hear and answer prayers? Can an unintelligent metaphysical process have a son called Jesus? And that's another thing, and that's another reason why I want to say that arguing this way is kind of disingenuous. Jesus, according to the Christians, is God. Jesus is an intelligent being. So regardless if the God nature of the other parts of the triune Godhead are quote-unquote intelligent or not, Jesus is. So, unless, of course, Jesus lost that capacity when He ascended to heaven after the resurrection. I don't know. thornisdan also brings up the idea of gods which are not all good, evil gods. Does that qualify as God? I think that's closer. Because, again, an evil God would be an intelligent being, and that is closer to the concept of God. Now, some would say that no, that couldn't count as God because, again, if we go back to the idea of the various ontological arguments, God is considered to be a maximally great being, and goodness or moral perfection is part of that. It is a great property, and therefore God, by definition, would have that. But then again, who came up with the idea of ontological arguments? Well, believers in God. They thought this is the right way to define God. I don't define Him that way. I get my definition from believers. They tell me, hey, there's this God critter and He has these attributes. And the only way I can know if such a God critter exists is if we see a thing in reality possessing these attributes. Anyway, I hope that helps. Thanks.